Chapter 31. Friends. The last vestiges of the walls of the city of Lufton slowly disappeared from sight as Reyes and a small group of humans passed beyond the tree line of the forest. It wasn't really all that far from the market square to where Reyes had walked to, but his feet were beginning to cry out with the effort that was being expected of them. He couldn't help but think how glad he would be to get back into the air and give his feet a rest for a while. Reyes stepped over to the side of the road and watched as everyone passed him. They watched him too. Reyes could tell how nervous some of them were even now. And there was that one woman who just wouldn't stop crying. In the skies overhead, Gagara came into land. She took a perch on a high branch of one of the trees that both overlooked the farmland and the road. From that high vantage point, she would be able to shout a warning should there be any kind of trouble back at the city. "So, I take it we can go now?" one of the militiamen asked. Now that they were out of sight of the city, most of the humans had stopped walking. They had started to gather in small groups of 3 or 4. Almost all of them were looking expectantly as the harpy, as if they expected the other shoe to drop. "You may go," Reyes promised. "Try to stay hidden and keep off the road as much as you can. You should do your best to avoid any contact with elves or their allies whatsoever. I won't be there to save you next time." Nanny began trying to usher the young Duchess along the road towards the south. "Come, child, we should go." "No, Nanny," Tamatha replied defiantly. "The harpy promised he'd take me to see the Queen. I'm going with him." "He's a harpy, sweetie," Nanny replied. She sounded a little impatient. "You can't trust him." "He's letting us go, isn't he?" the child said. "I think he's proven himself worthy of a little trust." "But," Nanny said. "Nanny," Tamatha replied indignantly, "know your place. I'm going with the harpy." Nanny sounded a little uncertain as she then said, "Fine, it's your funeral." Then a moment later she added, "And I guess it's mine too. I'm coming with you." Reyes took a couple of steps along the road towards the gathered humans and said, "Any of you who wish it are free to come with me. I can guarantee you a hiding place where the herbs can never find you." "What?" someone suggested. "In your stomach?" Gagara laughed, and then she said, "If we wanted to eat you, then why would we let you go?" She hopped down from her tree and landed on the opposite side of the road from where Reyes was standing, effectively boxing the small group of humans between them. "To hunt us," came a reply. "You let us go, then track us down and kill us. Thus you sate some primal need you creatures have." "Pah," Gagara intoned. "There's no talking to some people." "Go," Reyes said, approaching the humans at a slow pace. "If you don't feel you can trust me enough to stay, then go. If you scatter, then Gagara and I would never be able to hunt you all down. I'd like to assure you we've no plans of following you, but if you don't trust us already, there would be no point." Slowly, the humans began to filter themselves into the cover of the trees. Before long, most of them were out of sight. Reyes watched them go and did nothing to try and stop them. Perhaps those who did stay would trust him a little more when they saw that he was a harpy of his word. The fact was, Reyes was quite surprised at how many of the humans deemed to stay with him. There was the little Duchess and Nanny, of course. Reyes had never really had any doubt that those two would come with him. What did surprise him was the 4 others that also decided to trust the harpies enough to stay behind. They were all men, and not one of them was in the uniform of the militia. "So, where do we go?" Tamatha asked. Then one of the men commented, "I know you creatures are strong, but I doubt you can carry all 6 of us." Reyes laughed. "I could, but not the way you think. Give me a minute, I have to prepare something. Let's just say that magic is involved." "Magic?" the man who spoke commented. "I'm a little uncertain about magic. Besides, I thought you harpies couldn't use magic." "It's an item," Reyes revealed, looking up and down the road as far as he could see as he added, "We're able to use items just as well as anybody can." The man replied, sounding quite uncertain. Even though Reyes was sure the coast was clear and it was safe to bring the painting out of his ring, he was still hesitant to do so. The painting was a huge and unwieldy thing. It was also very heavy, and though it wasn't too heavy for a harpy, it would almost certainly unbalance him, unless he managed to hold it at his pivotal point. The idea of bringing it out into the open at all when he was in the middle of a forest in hostile territory terrified him more than a little. "I need everyone to stand behind me," Reyes said hoarsely. His mouth felt strange. "I need room, lots of room." He hoped there was enough room between him and the far side of the road. Reluctantly, the 6 remaining humans filed behind Reyes. Gagara stayed on her side of the road but hopped back into the branches of a nearby tree. Reyes breathed deeply, closed his eyes for a second, and then he crouched down low to the ground. He placed the palm of his hand flat towards the surface of the road and about an inch short of it, and then he called the painting out from the hammerstone. The painting was not quite as large as Reyes remembered it. He had been uncertain it would fit in the space available between him and the trees on the far side of the road, but it only took up about 3/4 of the available width. There were a number of startled gasps from the small group of humans gathered behind Reyes as the painting seemed to suddenly materialise out of thin air. "That's a painting," Tamitha said appreciatively. "Looks like some kind of old run-down ruined castle surrounded by wooden huts for as far as the eye can see." "That's where the king and queen reside," Reyes explained. "You see, I do carry them with me." "It's a painting. Is it some kind of teleportation device?" one of the men asked. "That's some fancy magic. Where were you hiding that?" another inquired. "How were you hiding that?" a third asked. Of all of them, Tamitha seemed to understand the most what the painting represented. "I've heard of paintings like these. My great uncle had something similar in his throne room. I'm afraid it's useless now. The phrase required to get into the painting was lost when he was killed." "What is it?" Nanny asked. "It's a painting," Tamitha replied as if it was obvious, "but no paintbrush has ever graced its surface. This is a painting created purely through the use of magic. By the look of it, it holds a great number of people." "I don't see any people," Nanny said. "I see a lot of old wooden shacks and a ruined old castle, but I can see no people." "They're in there," Tamitha said. "The people aren't literally a part of the painting," Reyes told her. "This is a huge painting. By the look of it, there's room in there for many thousands of people," Tamitha commented. "We estimate about 100,000, Reyes said. "Really?" Tamitha sounded more than a little surprised. "The king and queen must really trust you to allow you to carry them to wherever it is you're taking them like this." "They do," Reyes agreed. "Want to come and talk to them?" "Of course," Tamitha readily agreed. "Wait," one of the men said. "You mean enter the painting ourselves?" "That is what I mean," Reyes replied, glancing over at the man. I can't do that," the man said. "I'm sorry, I don't have enough trust to do that." "Me neither," said a second. "Perhaps I'll be more willing when I see the Duchess return safe and sound." "Safe and sound, yes," agreed the first. "But until then," the second added, "I'll stay here." "Very well," Reyes accepted. "You two can help keep an eye on the painting while we're gone. Make sure no harm comes to it." When he offered his hand to Tamitha, "Would you take my hand, Duchess?" "Everyone who is coming should lick hands," Tamitha said, and then she reached out and took Reyes' hand in hers. There was no hesitation. Some people, especially humans, didn't like to touch creatures that weren't human, but Tamitha had no such qualms. Before he uttered the phrase that would take them into the painting, Reyes looked up at the tree opposite and the perch from which Gagara was watching. He spoke flourish, knowing the medallion she wore would translate for her. He wanted the humans there to also be able to understand his words, so that they wouldn't think he was plotting against them. "I won't be gone too long. Make sure no harm befalls the painting, would you?" "What about Queen of Goth and Tenegi?" Gagara asked. "Hopefully I'll be back before they return," Reyes said. "But if not, start cooking without me. Whatever you do, don't set light to the painting. Don't let any harm come to the painting." Reyes wasn't sure he could emphasise that enough. "I wish I could come with you," Gagara voiced. "I'm sorry, love," Reyes said, "but I need you out here, just in case. I won't be long." Then he added a quick comment in the harpy tongue. "2 humans are staying behind. Make sure they don't do anything stupid." "Love you," Gagara said cheerfully. "Love you too," Reyes replied. "A harpy expressing love," Nanny commented. "Now I think I've heard everything." Reyes couldn't help smiling as he rested the palm of his hand on the surface of the painting. He closed his eyes and spoke a short and easy phrase. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer standing in the forest. This was the great hall of the old ruined castle. A part of one of the walls had fallen into the room and looked like the rest might collapse at any moment. It never would, though. Such was the nature of the painting. There was a strange sense of stillness about the place. Dust that had been falling during the instant the Mangloss had cast the final part of the spell still floated in the air between the ceiling and the ground, and would continue to do so for eternity, should the painting last that long. It was strange. The place looked so much like it had before it had been put into the painting, and yet there were so many subtle differences. The brick dust just floating in the air was one of the more noticeable ones, but there were others that he sensed more than noticed. The whole place just felt wrong. "Where are we?" Nanny asked worriedly. "Inside the painting," Tamitha replied calmly. "By the look of it, we're inside some part of the ruined castle that we saw. This place could definitely use a little bit of decoration." "This used to be the Great Hall," Reyes commented. He felt as if he should be breathing in swathes of brick dust, yet he felt no inclination to sneeze. Seeing the way the brick dust just floated in the air, refusing his attempts to breathe it in, made him wonder about the air itself. He didn't dwell on it too much, though. He had no doubt that Mangloss knew what he was doing. It's where the painting was positioned when the spell was cast. Well, Tamatha said, I didn't just come here to hang about in an old ruined castle. Let's go and have a look round. Then without another word she began to make her way towards the door. Tamatha, Nanny called after her. Be careful. Perhaps we ought to wait here. You can if you want to, Nanny, Tamatha replied. She reached the door and stepped through. Nanny chased after Tamatha, breaking into a run to catch her. Reyes walked after both of them. His feet hurt just enough to make it difficult to run. The two men who had also come into the painting followed behind Reyes, keeping a respectful gap between themselves and the harpy. There were two guards on duty at the main door of the keep. While the soldiers no longer needed to linger near the pillars in case the elf should stumble in, they now guarded the main entrance to the painting. But there were only two guards, almost as if there was nothing more than a courtesy detail. A sign, perhaps, that they trusted Reyes to complete his mission without problems. The two guards were dressed in the uniform of the Lamington militia. Their uniforms actually looked as if they'd been recently washed. With the threat of attack from the elves temporarily abated, some of the soldiers had taken the opportunity of getting their clothes clean. The two guards saluted Reyes as he stepped through the door. Reyes also had the strangest feeling that they were watching his every move, although neither of them spoke. Snow! Tamatha said excitedly. She bent down and grabbed a handful. I haven't seen snow for ages. Really? Reyes commented. All you need to do is travel north towards Borton, and you'll soon see plenty. Knowing how these paintings work, Tamatha commented, scrunching the snow into a ball, the snow must be a permanent fixture. It doesn't feel all that cold out here. No, Reyes agreed. Indeed it didn't. Mangloss must have done something to the ambient temperature in the painting, because it was actually quite warm, almost as warm as it had been out in the forest. The snow here wouldn't melt because it couldn't. There are definitely a lot of people here, Tamatha said appraisingly. She was looking out across the courtyard, beyond the line of peasants queuing up to fetch water, and beyond the gates, at the activity around the small wooden shacks. About 100,000, as I said, Reyes commented. No one has yet taken an accurate census. It's quite a powerful little army, Tamatha commented. I could make use of an army like this. We could liberate Loughton, and maybe even Borton. We could, Reyes agreed, but we wouldn't be able to hold it. We could try, Tamatha commented. She let her snowball drop harmlessly to the ground where it shattered. I'm sorry, Reyes told her. This army already has another target in mind. We'll see about that once I've spoken to the king and queen, Tamatha commented tersely. Where were you heading for? Arlis, Reyes told her. Arlis? The young girl exploded. That's a tiny city on a small series of islands. How can that be important? After First Town, Borton is the largest city in the land. That's where we should strike. There are at least 1 million humans on Arlis, Reyes told her. If we can rescue them, if we can cure them of the effects of elven food, and if we can train them properly, then we will have a large enough army to liberate the rest of the country. Tamatha let her head droop. I see. Then she looked up at him again. Good plan. That's a lot of ifs, Nanny commented. She looked up at the sky. I thought it was later when we entered the painting. From somewhere to the left a voice spoke. Reyes recognised it immediately as belonging to his old friend and mentor, Mangloss. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here. It's always 10 o'clock in the morning here. Mangloss, Reyes greeted happily. This is Mangloss, one of the men with Reyes commented. One of the greatest mages in the land has ever seen. He's so old. He looks as if a stiff breeze would knock him over. Reyes ignored the man and instead asked, How did you know I was here? Easily enough, Mangloss replied. I set up a small alarm set to trigger whenever anyone enters the painting. Clever, Reyes commented. Then Mangloss said, As I say, it's always 10 o'clock in the morning here. The body clock has a lot of trouble adjusting. I'd estimate it's been at least 2 days since we entered the painting, maybe even 3. Are we in Arlis yet? Not yet, Reyes admitted. Currently we're just to the south of Loughton. I expect we'll hit Arlis later tonight. Mangloss nodded his wise head and then suggested, As I said before you left, I'd rather not arrive at Arlis during the night or the late afternoon. We'll wait until tomorrow morning, Reyes acknowledged. Now, Mangloss said, how about introducing me to your friends? Reyes replied. Oh, sure. He indicated the little girl. This is Tamatha. She's the Duchess of Borton, unless someone with a better claim comes to the fore. Pleased to meet you, Duchess, Mangloss said, making an exaggerated bow. I want to meet the Queen, Tamatha replied simply. I'm sure that can be arranged. The King and Queen will be overjoyed to know that the Borton line still has an heir. This is Nanny, Reyes said, indicating the woman with Tamatha. Nanny isn't my name, idiot, Nanny commented tersely. It's my job. My name is Movealita. She pronounced it Movealita. Movealita, Rangloss said as he bowed. Pleased to meet you. I'm afraid I don't know the others' names. We only met about 2 hours ago, Reyes explained. I'm Iab, and this is my good friend Basmet. The man whose name was apparently Iab commented. Mangloss gave them both a quick bow and greeting, and then glanced at Tamitha. If you would follow me, your grace, I'm sure the king and queen will be only too happy to see you. Us too? Basmet asked. All of you, Rangloss replied, if you wish. I should be getting back, Reyes replied. I promised Gagara I wouldn't stay here too long. As you wish, Mangloss agreed. I'll see you sometime early tomorrow. Wait, Tamitha said eagerly. She looked at Reyes and then at the encampment. Although most of the people in the painting were clearly human, a few harpies could be seen flying in the skies in the distance. There had to be a limit as to how high the painting could go, and those harpies seemed to be trying to work it out for themselves. Somehow, the sight of the harpies mingling so easily with the humans, added to the fact that Reyes and Mangloss seemed to be getting on so well together, evidently made Tamitha feel as if she could trust Reyes fully. You saved my life. I'd like you to be there. Mangloss turned and began to lead the way. Once again, Reyes could see how the old man struggled to cover any distance. I could carry you, Reyes offered. I can manage, Mangloss replied tersely. Come, follow me. The king and queen weren't far away. They were outside the walls that surrounded the castle, just walking slowly about the encampment and doing their best to raise morale by being seen. Although they could have been anywhere in the encampment, Mangloss seemed to know exactly where they would be and went straight to them. Horse and tiger. Reyes, Jenny said eagerly, as soon as she saw him. It's great to see you. Does this mean we're there? Not yet, Reyes admitted. Soon, I hope. Tomorrow morning, Mangloss commented. And how far away is that? The king asked. Reyes didn't answer the king's question. Instead, he indicated the young child. I'd like to introduce you to the Duchess of Borton. Tamitha dropped a curtsy in front of the king and queen, her eyes wide with wonder. Movealita also dropped a curtsy, while the 2 men of the group made nervous bows. The harpy was telling the truth, Iab commented. He slapped a hand over his mouth, realising he had just spoken out of turn. Duchess, the king said, offering his hand to the child. It's good to know that your line still survives. Perhaps one day you'll be able to take your rightful place in the palace at Borton. The same day you take your rightful place on the throne at First Town, my liege, Tamitha replied, taking the hand. I feel there is little chance of either. You're a very intelligent little girl, aren't you? The king said. He kissed Tamitha's hand and released it. Her great uncle made sure she was well educated, Movealita commented. Then she suddenly seemed to realise that she had addressed the monarch without leave, and added, Begging your pardon. That's okay, Jenny said warmly. We welcome discourse here. There's something I have to tell you, Tamitha said. She looked worriedly to her nanny and the others who had entered the painting with them. She seemed somewhat hesitant to continue. I couldn't tell Reyes. I wasn't sure I could trust him. But now, Jenny said, I have no doubt as to what his intentions truly are. Tamitha looked apologetically at Reyes. Then she looked at Nanny and the 2 men, as if still uncertain she should continue. Basmet nodded, as if trying to reassure her that it was all right. Perhaps Nanny could put it better than I could, Tamitha remarked. I doubt it, Movealita replied. You tell them. You're doing fine. Tamitha took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a second and then began to speak. When Lufton fell, it pretty much did so without a struggle. It was always assumed that if the elves attacked, they would do so from the north, and we would have plenty of warning. So we were totally unprepared for an attack from the south. The elves were inside the city walls before we even realised they had entered the country. A few of our menfolk tried to fight them off, but they paid with their lives. The rest of us, including the 5,000-strong militia, knuckled under and prayed for the day when the king would come riding in with his army to liberate us again. Then what? King Oti asked. The king didn't come. We later heard that he and his entire family had been executed. They even showed us some kind of magical image of the king's execution, supposedly as it actually happened. They wanted to make it clear to us that help was not going to be forthcoming. As the last surviving member of the Borton family, I assume that made me queen. For that, I apologise. I meant no disrespect. The king nodded. That's okay. I'm sure you did so for the best of reasons. You couldn't know that Jenny and I were still alive. Tamitha sniffled a little and continued. On the second day of occupation, the elves started to gather some of our citizens and started shipping them south. They told us they wanted all the most able-bodied people between the ages of 12 and 60. They made no bones about the fact that they intended to transport everyone. I was too young, but as a Borton I knew it was my duty to do something. Go on, Jenny said. I wasn't the only one to think that way, Tamitha explained. You see, Loughton fell without a struggle. Most of the militia was still alive, and they felt they had a duty to protect the rest of the population as best they could. Now, by this time, they were greatly outnumbered. It wasn't the case that they could charge out onto the streets and fight to regain the city. They weren't trained like knights. They were little more than civilians turned soldiers. Nevertheless, they set about doing what they could to spoil the elves' plans and take everyone south. So, the king asked, the militia began a resistance movement. You know? Tamitha seemed surprised. Reyes told us, Jenny clarified. I've passed through Loughton before, about 4 months ago, Reyes explained. Really? Tamitha said with a nod. It wasn't easy. The elves set a very early curfew and filled the streets with their patrols, as if they were anticipating what the militia was planning to do. Then, in small groups no larger than any elven patrol, we started gathering those we could and moving them into safe houses about the city. Eventually we got as many people out of the city as we could. We lost a lot of people to the elven patrols, but most would rather die than spend the rest of their lives as slaves to the elvish war machine. You and your nanny were rescued, I take it, Reyes commented. My mother and father were also rescued, Tamitha said, sniffling. They were killed later during a raid against the elves. The people were readily willing to accept my father as the new duke, or even as the new king. They seemed somehow less inclined to accept me as their duchess or queen, though. We will accept you, Jenny said. Unless someone with a better claim makes an appearance, the king clarified. So, what happened? Jenny asked. To your parents, I mean. I'm sorry, I have to ask. Including the militia and everyone they rescued. There are close to 6,000 of us still alive and holed up outside the city. Everyone who gets rescued is expected to fight. 6,000 is a lot of mouths to feed, and the nearby lake doesn't produce enough fish to feed everyone. Some go hunting in the forest, doing their best to avoid the elven patrols. Others act like bandits, attacking any elves they meet on the road, or even conducting small raids against the city itself. My mother and father were out hunting when they were caught by an elven patrol and were taken to the city for execution. I'm sorry, Jenny said. Tamitha glanced up at Mauvais Alita and then looked over at the two men. We were about to suffer the same fate until your pet harpy came to our rescue. Pet? Reyes commented sharply. I mean no disrespect, Tamitha replied quickly. He's my brother, Jenny said calmly. Tamitha nodded. I know. So how did you get caught? The king asked. My father always led from the front. When he took the mantle of king on his shoulders, I tried to stop him going more than once, but he always said that it was expected of him, because he was the king. If the people were going to accept me as their queen, then could I do any less? Again, I apologise for the misunderstanding. You have nothing to apologise for, Jenny assured her. You do realise what this means, the king said, looking at his wife. It means there are still 6,000 people out there somewhere, and they are trained to fight. The gods know we could use all the help we can get in the coming battle. Yes, my dear, Jenny agreed. Reyes smiled and nodded, looking at Tamitha. Would you be willing to take me to them? No, Tamitha said sharply. She looked at Reyes. They would cut you down the moment they saw you. Reyes laughed. I don't doubt they would. Then he switched his appearance to that of a human, dressed in the clothing of a gentleman. How about now? Tamitha laughed. You know, you're not bad looking as a human. I don't think my wife would agree with you, Reyes said, grinning. Tamitha gave him a strange look as she repeated, Your wife? You are still a harpy, aren't you? A married harpy, Reyes replied with a smile. Will you be all right? Jenny asked. Maybe I should come along. I'd rather you stayed safe, Reyes replied. I can always swap back to my natural form and fly away if I get into trouble. I'll take the girl along with me. I still have her ring. I'll need to get some clothing from Alicia, though. The last lot of clothing she had got damaged. I can lend you some. I've had a few things made since we got here, Jenny said. It would be better to get the clothes from Alicia. Hopefully she'll have some clothes that can be removed from the painting, Mangloss advised. She and Gagara are about the same size. Then to Reyes he said, Gagara will have to put them on the hard way, unless you want to wait for me to put some magical thread in them. It's temporary, Reyes said. She can put them on even if I have to dress her myself. It's a long way to our refuge from where we laid out the painting, Tamitha warned. It could be as much as 5 or 6 miles. If you want, I can wait here until you fly a little bit closer. Without you to guide me, I won't know where I'm going, Reyes explained. Head towards the lake, Tamatha said. Stop about a mile. It would be better if we all travel as humans, Reyes interrupted. He looked at the king. If I could get a horse, a good one, for Tamatha. Done, King Goatee readily agreed. What about yourself? I have a horse, Reyes replied. Gagora and I can travel together. She doesn't know how to ride. Good luck convincing her then, Mangloss commented. I am not leaving Tamatha in the hands of a harpy, even if she does look human, Movealetta said, looking around at Reyes. No offence. Reyes grinned. So, you want to come too? Movealetta nodded, a little reluctantly. 2 horses then, the king said. No problem. Then he addressed Basmet and Iab. What of you two? I think I want to stay here. If that's all right, Iab replied. Me too, Basmet agreed. We should try and find a place where our people can settle down. Hopefully it will only be for one night, Jenny told them. I'm sure we'll be able to manage the extra influx of people for one night. What are you going to do about those other 2 huntresses you took with you? The king asked. I have to convince them to wait in the painting somehow, Reyes replied. He could imagine the argument he was going to have with them. Their mail had to be protected at all times. But this was important. Reyes was not going to be swayed.